Hello and welcome. You're watching To The Point. Yesterday's press conference by the Pakistan High Commissioner seems to have both ruffled Indian feathers and threatened the peace process agreed to last year in December. But was the Pakistan High Commissioner properly understood and interpreted, or has he been contradicted by his own Foreign Office spokesman? And on Pathankot, does his line represent a split between the civil and military authorities in Pakistan? Finally, where as a result do India-Pakistan relations stand today? My guests are India's former High Commissioner to Pakistan, Satyabrat Pal, the founding editor of the Wire.in, Siddharth Vardarajan, the diplomatic editor of the Hindu, Suhashini Haider, and joining us from Islamabad, Pakistan's former High Commissioner to India, Aziz Ahmed Khan, and the highly regarded military and political analyst, Aisha Siddiqa. Suhashini Haider, let's start with the Pakistan High Commissioner's press conference yesterday. Did he himself announce that the Indo-Pakistan Comprehensive Bilateral Dialogue had been suspended, or did he simply respond to a question asking him how he views the present state of the peace process? Which of the two was it?
Well, Karan, there were two parts to what he said. So the first part, as you are saying, was quite right. He was responding to a comment in which he said that the state of play is such that the talks are suspended. I have not heard of any foreign secretary talks being scheduled, is what he said. But then the second part of it, when he was asked, did he mean that the foreign secretary talks had been suspended, he said, I leave the rest up to your imagination. So I do sense that while he was just trying to be accurate in his first answer, he did leave room open for it to sound like he was actually saying that the talks were not going to in fact recommence.
Satyabrat Pal, let me draw your attention to two comments made by our Foreign Secretary Jaishankar. First, on the 3rd of March, he said, and I'm quoting him, in the aftermath of a terror attack, if you ask me what do you give priority to, a terrorist attack or a diplomatic dialogue, I think the answer should be obvious. Then on the 6th of April, which is incidentally just one day before Mr. Bassett spoke, he said, and again I'm quoting him, until we are able to address the issue of terrorism effectively, obviously it's hard for us to say that the relationship is normal. This is what puts Pakistan in a different category to our other neighbors. Now, if Mr. Bassett concludes from those two comments that I think at present the peace process is suspended, would Mr. Bassett be wrongly concluding?
Well, I think it's been quite clear for some time now that as far as the government of India is concerned, everything else is predicated on our getting some satisfaction on terrorism. So indeed the wider process is in a state of suspended animation and has been for some time now. It sort of blinks its eyelashes when the Indian voices say terrorism. But other than that, there isn't any sign of life in it. So I wouldn't say that the Pakistani High Commissioner is far wrong.
So you wouldn't say the Pakistani High Commissioner is far wrong? In fact, if everything from the Indian point of view is predicated on movement on terror and Pathankot, then it does mean that till that happens, the peace process is suspended.
I think any number of Indian spokesmen have made that quite clear.
Now, in fact, the truth is, Suhashini Haider, that if you view the Pakistan High Commissioner's full answer, it goes beyond simply saying that the comprehensive bilateral dialogue is suspended. He says, and again I'm quoting him, Suhashini, if India is not yet ready, we can always wait. Because as far as Pakistan is concerned, we consider the dialogue process important to resolve our problems. So we will wait and see how India evolves its position on the dialogue process. Doesn't that put a different complexion on Mr. Bassett's answer compared to, say, today's Times of India headline which says, Pak envoy kills peace process, or the Indian Express headline which says, Pak stirs the pot on talks?
Karan, I can't comment on other newspapers' headlines. Our own said quite clearly that we thought the Pakistani envoy was accusing India of suspending dialogue. And we know that for months now, especially after the Pathankot attack, when the foreign secretary talks were put off after that was due to be held on the 14th. Pakistan has repeatedly been asking why isn't the foreign secretary level talks being rescheduled, while India is willing to only schedule the talks that really deal with terror, whether it's been the SIT, whether it's been that brief meeting between the foreign minister and Mr. Sartaj Aziz. But you're right. On the one hand, it does seem as if Mr. Basit was making the point that it was up to India when it wanted to restart the dialogue because there was no problem from Pakistan's side. But you also have to look at the larger context, I think, Karan. It isn't usual for any High Commissioner or envoy at a time when relations are sensitive to hold a press conference at all and to answer questions when there wasn't any particular news around which that press conference was pegged. So I do think you have to leave a little bit of doubt in for why that press conference was held if it wasn't to make the point that he felt in some way unhappy with the fact that there were no foreign secretary level talks, that the comprehensive bilateral dialogue wasn't taking place.
Let's go across to Islamabad. Aziz Ahmed Khan, let me start with you. On the other hand, your Foreign Office spokesperson Nafeez Zakaria, speaking after your High Commissioner had spoken in Delhi, seemed to take a very different line to Mr. Basit. Answering a questioner, this is what Mr. Zakaria said. Your question implies whether the Foreign Secretary level talks will take place or not. I have stated this many times that both countries are in contact with each other, and it has been reiterated from both sides that modalities are being worked out. Aziz Ahmed Khan, how do you account for the different line taken by your High Commissioner on the one hand and by your Foreign Office spokesperson on the other?
Karan, personally, I don't see any difference between the much of a gap between the two statements. One is an expression that since May 2014, we have been talking about resuming the dialogue process, renaming the dialogue process. The talks will start, something happens, then again the things are suspended. So nothing has happened almost for 2 years. The talks have not got off to a start. All Basit has mentioned, and I would tend to agree with him, that the talks, if you were to ask me what is the status of the talks, I would say they are suspended. They're not broken off, but nothing is happening. What is a suspension? That is all that that it implies is that the talks are not taking place. Modalities are being worked out. So your own Foreign Secretary, India's Foreign Secretary, has said that has implied as if so long as terrorism issue is not resolved, there is not much of a chance for the dialogue process to start. Although Pakistan's position has been that we are ready to start the process whenever India wants. So I don't think that Basit has said anything which merits the kind of sensationalist headline that Times of India gave, but then that is expected of Times of India. I mean, they usually come up with such headlines. So I think Basit has not said anything which is contrary to what the government of Pakistan's position is.
Aisha Siddiqa, there is a view in India that the different line taken by your High Commissioner on the one hand and your foreign spokesperson on the other reflects differences between your military and civilian government over the dialogue and peace process. Do you agree with that interpretation?
Well, partly I would agree with that interpretation, but let me get back to what Basit had said. And I would kind of agree that he wasn't either killing peace talks or, raising caution. I think what his views were, they reflected a kind of frustration that there is variation. I mean, it's a realization perhaps that there is a variation not just in civil military in Pakistan, but also how the two countries take peace talks or the peace process. From Pakistani Foreign Office's perspective, it's important to start the comprehensive dialogue, and that's what he was referring to. While in India's case, there is this issue of talking about terrorism first, and so he was reflecting that frustration. Now, as far as Pakistani political government is concerned, and I'm referring to what happened at Ufa, I think the political government is ready to start talks, go on, even if if it's about terrorism, let's talk. And there would be a difference in position between how the establishment thinks and how the political government thinks.
Aziz Ahmed Khan, before I come back to my guests in India, I want to put to you something that your predecessor as High Commissioner, Ashraf Ghazi, told the Hindu newspaper this morning. When he was asked, about the difference of opinion between the civilian and military governments in Pakistan over the peace process with India, Mr. Qazi said that he believed Prime Minister Sharif's line will prevail over Army Chief Sharif's line. Do you agree with Mr. Qazi?
I don't think that there is any opposition as far as the military is concerned to starting a comprehensive dialogue process with India. There might be differences in nuances in approach, but those will come up only when the talks proceed. Here the question is that nothing has got started so far. 2 years have passed and we have passed and we are just talking about talks, that we are negotiating the dates, we are negotiating this, that and the other. Right after the Prime Minister's Sharif's visit to India for Prime Minister Modi's inauguration, I think your previous Foreign Secretary Sujata put a dampener on the entire enthusiasm that was generated by that visit, and since then we have been going on talking about talks and nothing gets started. And as Aisha very rightly mentioned, the expression that the words of our High Commissioner Basit expressed that frustration that he as a High Commissioner must be feeling, that everything is being tried and nothing is happening.
Siddharth Rajan, the line you're getting from both Aziz Ahmed Khan and Aisha Siddiqa in Islamabad is that High Commissioner Basit was expressing and ventilating the frustration the Pakistanis feel over the fact that the talks process has been hanging in the air, virtually suspended since May 2014. On the other hand, it's no great secret that the Indian Foreign Office views High Commissioner Basit as a hardliner, and they suspect that he is not keen on pursuing talks. And therefore, do you think that this idea of holding a press conference suddenly, when the situation is rather tense and precarious between the two countries and there's no real news point to justify holding the press conference, was a bit of an error on the part of the High Commissioner, because he was opening himself up to the sort of misinterpretation that's happened, if it is misinterpretation?
Well, I think it is an error, or it was an error on his part, simply because he should have anticipated that even matter-of-fact statements, such as that the peace process is effectively suspended, is quite likely in the hands of imaginative sub-editors and TV anchors to become something rather more sensational. If you ask me, I saw nothing at all extraordinary or different from what Pakistan has said in the past in what High Commissioner Basit said in Delhi. The fact is that India and Pakistan are not talking. They are meant to talk, but until there is some resolution of the Pathankot investigation process, it's very clear, and India herself has said this often. I think Foreign Secretary Jaishankar reiterated this in so many words when he spoke day before yesterday in Delhi. So I think that there is no mystery. The fact is that the peace process is effectively suspended. And, he said this, he used language which, incidentally, the Indian Foreign Office itself chose to downplay in its reaction. So I think that this is a very good example of where the media gets carried away with a non-story. There were other elements in what Basit said which were more newsworthy, but somehow people convinced themselves that the so-called suspension of the peace process was the headline to run with. And we've seen a lot of creative journalism emerging as a result, which is really quite unfortunate.
Do you accept that line, that in fact High Commissioner Basit has ended up this morning the victim of journalists who perhaps misunderstood saying the process was suspended himself and proclaiming it to be so? He was simply expressing an interpretation of what he believes has been the situation for the last few months. And secondly, journalists have ignored the fact that our Foreign Secretary has at least on 2 occasions said this, as you pointed out yourself. Has he become therefore the victim of rather poor reportage this morning?
Well, he certainly has placed himself in harm's way, as Siddharth said. But yes, I think the reporting this morning that I saw in the press was not entirely fair. It wasn't. It was a selective misquoting of what he had said and put entirely the wrong spin on, I think, what he had meant to convey.
But you do also believe that he put himself in harm's way by holding a press conference when there was no need to do so, and when the time was perhaps the wrong time to do it.
It is rather unusual, because most High Commissioners in Islamabad and Delhi tend to run from cover from the press. They don't actively seek the press out.
Let's come, Suhashini Heather, to something else that the High Commissioner spoke about, which maybe most people believe of much greater importance. Do you think the there should be greater concern about the comments he made about how Pakistan might not accept an NIA team visiting Pakistan. Again, I want to, for the sake of the audience, quote what he said. I personally feel this whole investigation is not about the question of reciprocity, it's more about extending cooperation, or are two countries cooperating with each other to get to the bottom of the incident. And then after that, when he was asked if he was ruling out a visit to Pakistan by the NIA, he added, I leave it to your imagination. Do you think this is the more important part of the Pakistan High Commissioner's press conference? And here, most people perhaps could be correct in saying he was clearly suggesting an NIA team wouldn't be welcome.
Well, Karan, at the end, if you just go by the words on a blank piece of paper, you might feel that there's actually nothing, exceptional about any of what Mr. Basit was saying. But look at the context in which he's speaking, and I think I agree with Ambassador Pal completely, that normally when relations are this sensitive, High Commissioners and Ambassadors tend to run from the press. Instead, we have him not only making a very strong opening statement and then taking questions and answers. A simple question, for example, on when the NIA team would be going back to Pakistan could be answered by saying the dates are being worked out. Instead, he didn't answer that question and instead went on to make this very elaborate construct which seems to suggest that he doesn't think reciprocity is as important as cooperation. Now, the truth is, you could say that there is nothing wrong with what he said, but I do think if you look at the context, it would have been easier for him to have simply said, we're working out a date, or that's under consideration, or in fact refer to the terms of reference, which according to the Indian government say very clearly it's on the basis of reciprocity.
In fact, that's the point I want to pick up with you, Siddharth Varadarajan, before I go back to my two guests in Islamabad. Our spokesperson, Vikas Swarup, quickly pointed out that on March the 26th, before the Pakistani JIT had actually come to India, the Indian High Commission had formally told the Pakistan Foreign Office that the visit of the Pakistan JIT was on the basis of reciprocity. So do you get the feeling that Mr. Basit was either contradicting that, or possibly he was even unaware of the March 26th conversation between our High Commissioner and the Pakistan Foreign Office, i.e. he was somehow mysteriously out of the loop?
Look, I'd be surprised if he wasn't aware of the exchanges, either in the form of notes or whatever, between India and Pakistan before the JIT came. I'm sure he knows what the terms of reference that underlies this entire process consists of. I would say that again, the use of language, perhaps slightly unfortunate. If you notice carefully, he doesn't rule out Pakistan following reciprocity. In fact, he says more than reciprocity is cooperation that's important, and he doesn't say that Pakistan will not cooperate. But I think what he has said, and my own understanding as an analyst, is that this return visit by the NIA and the kind of task that the NIA would like to do when it goes there would be something rather more difficult for Pakistan to deliver on, quite frankly. And to the extent to which I'm correct in my assessment of Pakistan perhaps not being so welcoming of an NIA delegation as we were at the JIT, it's clear that what Basit said is, language along those lines. So I think that for me, as a journalist, as an editor, the headline really from the press conference was not the suspension or otherwise of the peace process, but the question mark over the status of NIA's return visit. Because clearly for us, as NIA Chief Sharad Kumar said, the NIA wants to make that visit to Pakistan. They do want to go there to further the Pathankot investigation. Ideally, we would like to have access to those individuals from the Jaish-e-Mohammed that Pakistan has detained, although Vikas Swarup has been careful, the Indian spokesperson has been careful not to describe what the NIA would like to do when it goes to Pakistan as part of an investigation effort.
Aziz Ahmed Khan, I'm going to go back to that March 26th agreement on the basis of which the Pakistani JIT visit happened last week. Now, it was conveyed to your Foreign Office by our High Commissioner there, Gautam Bambawale, according to the Times of India, by a note verbal. Therefore, it was not just formally conveyed, it was conveyed in writing. Now, how do you explain the fact that your High Commissioner either was contradicting that, or perhaps, as I was speculating a moment ago, utterly unaware of it? Because it can't be anything else.
Well, You see, I think too much is being read out of the High Commissioner's statement. If the government has, in fact, I'm not aware of, and I have not seen the official documents, so I cannot really say definitively what it was conveyed, but if your government has conveyed to our government that this visit of GIT is on the principle of reciprocity, fair enough. What the High Commissioner has said, that more than reciprocity, it is cooperation, and I think cooperation is far more than tit for tat or whatever call reciprocity. We are talking about cooperating with each other in order to resolve a heinous crime which has been committed.
You know, Aziz Ahmed Khan, you would be correct. Can I interrupt? You would be correct in saying that cooperation is far more than reciprocity, but for the fact that when your High Commissioner was thereafter specifically asked if he was ruling out a visit to Pakistan by the NIA, he answered by saying, I leave it to your imagination. That's the real spoiler.
Well, I suppose he may have just mentioned it that you imagine yourself what it means, but I personally feel when he has said that the two sides are cooperating with each other, cooperating is a far stronger word than reciprocity.
Aisha Siddiqa,
and far more important in this context.
Aisha Siddiqa, once again, and I put this to you because you're a military analyst and you understand the Pakistani military and its thinking far better than anyone else. Once again, is Mr. Basit reflecting the Pakistani army, maybe the ISI's reservations about receiving an Indian NIA team in Islamabad?
I think not only that, he even said it. I mean, they're very unhappy. There is this unhappiness that, and he said it, that the visiting GIT, it didn't get the kind of cooperation they thought they would from the Indian side. He spoke about it. So, and that's one. And the other is that, yes, I mean, I don't think that what he was trying to say between lines is that the kind of, I mean, if the NIA is expecting certain things during that, from their visit to Pakistan, I'm sure they're not going to get it. I mean, access to Masood Azhar, probably not, and you know, certainly not the answers, the kind of answers that India may be looking for. And the other thing, of course, is that in the background is the Kulbhushan Yadav case hanging.
Can I stop you there? I'll come to Kulbhushan Yadav in a moment's time. I'll come to that after a moment's time. Let's for now focus on this business of reciprocity, although I know it's all connected. But let me put this to you. You've heard two different answers from Pakistan. You've heard Aziz Ahmed Khan saying that in fact the Pakistan High Commissioner, by talking about cooperation, was actually stressing something that's much more important, more all-embracing than reciprocity. And Mr. Aziz Ahmed Khan virtually ignored the fact that when specifically asked whether he was ruling in or ruling out a visit by the NIA, Mr. Basit said, I leave it to your imagination. But from Aisha Siddiqa, you've heard a more open assessment that in fact the army has a lot of reservations about an NIA coming, it won't get full cooperation, and maybe army sources feel their JIT here also didn't get the cooperation and help it needed. What do you make of these two rather different answers?
I think let's go back to this dichotomy that Ambassador Basit sought to drive between cooperation and reciprocity. Now, cooperation on matters connected to terrorism is now a legal obligation on all countries and has been since Security Council Resolution 1373 was adopted. There is no option. That is now part of the SARC Convention also on terrorism, on which an additional protocol was negotiated and adopted after 1373 was passed. So cooperation is a given. How countries cooperate is the point. And on this matter, if an Indian note verbal has said that the cooperation we are extending is predicated on reciprocity, and Pakistan has accepted that, then clearly reciprocity is the way forward. And therefore, if High Commissioner Basit is seeking to cast doubts on that, he is in a way going against the terms on which the cooperation so far has been taken forward.
Very quickly, Aziz Ahmed Khan, as a diplomat, do you want to respond to what you've heard from Satyabrat Pal? That if the note verbal stressed that the basis on which the cooperation is happening is reciprocity, then the High Commissioner apparently backing out of that agreement of reciprocity is actually a setback.
You see, if a note verbal has been presented saying what you say it said, then, and the government of Pakistan has accepted that, then obviously the government has accepted that. So there is no way a High Commissioner can imply that we are trying to get out of that. I think it is just a gap of interpretation. He probably felt that expressing cooperation encompasses far more than mere reciprocity does.
All right. You're a very kind colleague. I assume you probably understand your successor better than the rest of us. I see no reason why you shouldn't have the last word and give him the benefit of the doubt. Let's take a break at that point. When I come back, I want to turn to Kulbhushan Yadav, the man that Pakistan considers an Indian spy. To what extent could that be a spoiler in the relationship? To what extent does it reveal that, in fact, the two countries have handled that particular episode, tricky and embarrassing though it is, with skill and adroitness? Welcome back. You're watching To The Point, and we're discussing Indo-Pakistan relations. Let's come to the arrest of an alleged Indian spy. And I'll begin with you before I go to Pakistan, Satyabrat Pal. The alleged Indian spy is Kulbhushan Yadav. The Pakistanis claim they've had him since roughly the 2nd or 3rd of March. How serious a problem has this created? A, after the euphoria that the Lahore December visit generated, and B, after the very mature and restrained way both countries have handled Pathankot up till now?
Well, so far, I must say, after the initial hullabaloo, even the Kulbhushan Yadav case has not really generated the sort of hype that it might have had. It really threatened for a moment to get out of hand. But until the High Commissioner raked it up yesterday, I thought it had been taken as a hiccup, but no more than that.
So once again, both countries, until yesterday's comments by the Pakistan High Commissioner, you thought were restrained and mature and sensible in their handling?
That I thought was a fair assessment.
Let me put that to you, Aziz Ahmed Khan. Pakistan has always believed that India is involved in stirring trouble in Baluchistan. And now, from your standpoint, and you said this to me, in fact, earlier in a program, this is proof, the capture of Kulbhushan Yadav. How will Pakistani diplomacy play this up hereafter? Or do you agree with what Satyabrat Pal has said, that in fact, beyond seeing it as a bit of a hiccup, you don't intend to make too much of it?
Well, I think both countries are acting maturely. Both countries have shown restraint in their pronouncements, which we did not see in the past, and that is very welcome. Yes, Pakistan has suspected Indian interference in Balochistan since a very long time, and I know of it personally because I was handling that area in year 2000 and 2001 and had taken it up officially as well. Now that we have a proof that we feel vindicated, but at the same time the way the government of Pakistan has responded has been in a mature manner. I think the two sides need to discuss these issues, and the two sides need to start a new line of interaction between them, because if we are both committed to fight terrorism, then we have to make sure that we start a process by which activities such as Mr. Yadav's are brought to a halt, and we start a new state of play between the two countries.
Aisha Siddiqa, for many people in India, the Kulbhushan Yadav episode hinges on how the Pakistan army views Mr. Yadav. Now, as I said, you understand the Pakistan army and is thinking better than anyone else. Can you answer that question for me? How does the Pakistan army view Kulbhushan Yadav?
Of course, they look at him as somebody who has been involved in terrorism in Pakistan in different parts, in Karachi, in Balochistan in particular. They're worried about CPEC and that India is uncomfortable with the China-Pakistan economic corridor, etc. So that's one, that's how they look at Yadav. But I think more than that, now they're saying, they're probably looking at the case and saying, well, if we are going to talk terrorism, then we are probably, their hair is an equalizer. India is doing exactly what they think that we are doing.
Got cut
so,
carry on.
So, if we are equal, then what we need to probably move on and talk about other things, like talk about Kashmir, talk about a comprehensive dialogue. Why just focus on terrorism? Because if we start talking about terrorism, then we're equal. No one is better than the other. That's the message which seems to be coming through from the Pakistan Army.
How do you respond to that? That the argument that you heard from Aisha Siddiqa is that the Pakistan Army will use the fact that they have Kulbhushan Yadav, an Indian alleged spy, in their hands to say that, look, we've got as much proof of involvement in terror or spying as you have of us. Therefore, let's put terror and spying on the back burner and get on to talk about the other issues. In other words, they could use this as a way of saying, stop giving priority to terror because we can use it against you, move on to other subjects. Do you think there's a danger that could happen?
Before we get to that point, the Pakistan Army or the Pakistan establishment will have to establish first that Kulbhushan Yadav was involved in terrorism. Even if he was a spy.
His so-called confession, and I say so-called, does say that he was involved in maiming and injuring civilians, and he at one point even uses the word terrorist activities.
The confession in itself establishes nothing more than that he said that. But it will have to be established, more evidence will have to be provided, which so far the government of Pakistan has singularly failed to do. So I think we need to bear in mind that even if he was a spy, which itself needs to be established, there is the great distinction between spying for the collection of intelligence
and terror. So Hashni Heather, India was very prompt to accept that Kulbhushan Yadav was an Indian citizen and a former Navy officer, and at that time many thought that this was a welcome element of transparency. But now with hindsight, do you think that was a bit of a mistake by Delhi?
Well, I certainly think nobody left any time to figure out whether it was the right thing or not. Delhi's reaction came, if you remember, on a holiday. And it meant that the government had taken a very considered decision to accept that the man that Pakistan claimed to have arrested was in fact the man they believed to be a former naval officer. I think in hindsight it was a little too quickly because Pakistan is yet to give a consular access to India. So unless there's something going on, Karan, a lot of this show that we're discussing hinges on the same fact that unless the government knows something that they're not telling everyone, clearly there is a lack of communication at many ends within the Indian government as well when it comes to dealing with Pakistan. So whether it's the JIT, whether it's the talks, whether it is this case of how to react to this man alleged to be a spy, there seems to be a sense that that there is a lack of communication within the government, and certainly what the government is telling all of us. So a lot of us are jabbing in the dark, if you like, when we try to figure out just why the government is reacting in a certain way. It would seem a little unusual that as soon as Pakistan has made this great announcement of an arrest of a man that they claim is not only creating problems in Balochistan, it goes on to say that he was possibly part of a plot against hotels in Gwadar port where Chinese nationals are known to live. They talk about his links with the NDS, with the Afghan National Security Agency as well. They certainly tried to make the point when President Rouhani of Iran arrived over there. So if we were to say, as Ambassador Pal was perhaps suggesting, that this is just a spy game sort of story and it will die out, I think we do have to look at how seriously Pakistan is taking it, and as a result, is it the best thing for India to have straight away accepted everything Pakistan said on face value and said, yes, this is the man that we believe to be this naval officer, without actually finding out much more. As I said, maybe there is a lot that India and Pakistan are speaking to each other about behind the scenes, but if there is that, we're not seeing any evidence of it.
Siddharth Varadarajan, I want to ask you a blunt question, because your website the Wire.in has actually covered Kulbhushan Yadav in fairly extensive detail. At the end of the day, what is your hunch? And it is your hunch I'm asking for. Is Kulbhushan Yadav an Indian spy? And by the way, before you answer, let me point out that saying yes won't preclude the possibility that he was either lured into Pakistan by false pretenses or even kidnapped by Pakistan.
You know, a lot of what he has done, or what he's accused of doing, or what he says he's done, does not fit the pattern of a spy or an intelligence officer, particularly at that level, right? He is a commander in the Navy, a lieutenant colonel, a senior officer, and the things that he has confessed to doing on Pakistan television do not comport with what intelligence officers of that grade would be doing, and the descriptions he's given of the kind of actions that he has purportedly done with RAW, etc., again, do not fit with the mandate of RAW or with the mandate of naval intelligence. So I think it's a little bit of an enigma. I would say the fact that the government of India acknowledged that he is an Indian citizen and were able to confirm the fact that he is ex-military probably has to do with the fact that the government of India had information about who he was, and his maybe the fact that he went missing was also known to the government of India, which is why they were able to confirm his identity as soon as the Pakistanis made that formal claim. But I think that the bigger question, Karan, here is not whether he is who he says he says he is, or who the Pakistanis say, but how far the Pakistanis intend to take this. Because I understand from looking at the Pakistani press and also interacting with some with Pakistani officials, that they are going to try to make a case linking Jadhav and by extension the Indian side to concrete acts of terror. As Ambassador Pal said, nothing in what Jadhav is purported to have confessed before the cameras links him or India to any terrorist activity. But I have seen in the Pakistani press an attempt to link Jadhav via a person called Sufi Baloch, Haji Baloch, to the Safura, the heinous killing of Ismailis in Karachi last year, which it really beggars belief that India would be involved in this sort of a thing. But I think if the Pakistanis are going to push the dialogue, push the discussion in that direction and make this kind of charge, I think this is definitely going to cast a very ugly shadow on the future dialogue process between India and Pakistan as and when it gets resumed.
We're coming right to the end of this particular episode. I want to ask two questions to you. How worried are you that Kulbhushan Yadav has given the Pakistanis an opportunity and perhaps some measure of evidence to be able to rake up all the issues and concerns linked to terror, etc., that Aisha had earlier spoken about and that you just heard Siddharth Varadarajan elaborate about? How worried are you that could then be a real spoiler in the relationship, just when, since December, we thought maybe there is an improvement taking place?
Well, it will depend very much on who Kulbhushan Yadav is and what capacity he's been where he has. So I think we can only speculate what he says voluntarily or under duress. But this sort of incident is not unheard of between countries.
But you're saying something very important, that how this incident plays out is something we have to wait and watch. We just can't predict at the moment.
Exactly. It depends very much on how the two governments wish to play it.
What about something else? Would you therefore say that the most hopeful thing at the moment in the relationship between the two countries is the belief that the two NSAs, Arajit Joval and their Janjua, have established a rapport and an understanding which perhaps goes back to their meeting in Bangkok in December, and the fact that they've been talking to each other behind the scenes right through the Pathankot episode and possibly even now? Is that the most hopeful development, the best hope that this relationship is still continuing even if it's only inching?
Yes, I think any sort of dialogue that continues, where people can talk to each other and try to sort out each other's concerns quietly, not in the public glare, is helpful in a relationship that is as fraught and complicated as ours is. And to that extent, yes, it is a hopeful sign, but I hope we can build on it.
Why do you doubt that we may not be able to build on it?
Because if matters are allowed to fray, if they get out of control, then these quiet conversations will either have to be suspended or will not have the effect that they seem to have had so far.
So in other words, these quiet conversations that are perhaps a small ray of hope themselves could be weakened or put on the side very easily.
That's right.
Thank you very much for that. My thanks to you for coming to the studio. My thanks also to all my other guests. And if you have been, thanks for watching. Goodbye.
All right, we're getting news that after getting DNA samples, or rather giving the DNA samples of the 4 Pakistani terrorists killed in the Pathankot airbase attack, India is now contemplating disposing of the dead bodies lying.
There's the hair. But then I decided to use the public transport. And now I feel I look like Natha. But don't you worry, the show looks fantastic.